Welcome back, America. You've heard me talking about Representative Barry Loudermilk, Georgia Congressman. He's the chairman of this subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee and Oversight, and he's done a fantastic job, he and his staff. It's much harder to dig through what another committee has done with the enormous amount of information and the enormous amount of information that's been destroyed and so forth than it is to actually conduct a regular investigation. So, Congressman, I want to ask you this. You walk into this responsibility, you're handed this responsibility, your staff's handed this responsibility, and then you find out, oh my God, they destroyed the equivalent of hundreds of thousands of books. We can't find the videos. You really had to work hard to piece this together, didn't you?
We absolutely did, and I give a lot of credit to our team they were dedicated to this task, and they were relentless. And, we weren't sure if we were going to ever recover it all, which we haven't. Those videos that you just referenced, they're gone. No one seems to know what happened to them. But one thing we started realizing is there's a reason we don't have this information. It isn't just haphazard that there's missing documents. There seemed to be rhyme and reason. As we started digging into them, we started finding out, well, it was documents and information that did not play into their star witnesses' accounts of things that happened, nor in some cases, it was just information that didn't support their predetermined narrative, that Trump caused all of January 6th. That's what they wanted to get at. And as you have seen in our report, it was a massive failure at several levels in several entities of government. And then the big concern that we had is the cover-up that followed. And so how many agencies just stood quietly while the Select Committee pinned everything on the shoulders of people like Donald Trump, former Capitol Police Chief Sund, the D.C. National Guard? They just sat quietly while they allowed the Select Committee to take all of this and put it on their shoulders. And so we want to make sure that, America understood what really happened, and more importantly, that justice would be served.
Congressman Loudermilk, let me ask you this. Have you sat down with the New York Times? Have they interviewed you about this? Have you sat down with the Washington Post? Have they interviewed you about this? How about 60 Minutes? How about George Stephanopoulos? How about the Today Show? Has anybody sat down and said, my God, we read this report. It's unbelievable. We have some questions for you. Have they?
No, not about this. Now, the New York Times have interviewed me about the Secret Service when we first uncovered that their transcribed interviews had been sent to the Department of Homeland Security. They interviewed me about that, but their article that they printed was nowhere close to, what we were actually telling them and what we had revealed. The problem we're having, and one reason, and I've heard this from some people deep within the mainstream media, they're watching what we're doing and they're amazed at the information that's coming out, but they can't spin it because it's just fact. And so that's why we're not getting a lot of coverage on this, because they can't spin this in the light of which Liz Cheney and the Select Committee proposed all of this novel that they produced in December of 2 years ago. And so when they can't put a political spin to the left, they just ignore it.
The chairman of the committee, the so-called vice chair of the committee, do they take responsibility for the destruction of records, the destruction of videos, the withholding of information, the transferring of property of the House of Representatives to the Biden regime? Do they take responsibility for any of this?
They should, but they haven't. And this is part of the problem. Now, look, I can give Congressman Benny Thompson a little bit of a break, because from what we've seen in our investigation, he was more of a figurehead. It was Liz Cheney who was calling the strikes and balls during this entire game they were playing. It was her that was in the lead of this. Now, he'll argue that he kept everything he was required to keep. Well, he has a different interpretation of House rules and protecting and archiving of government documents than me and the clerk and others have. So this is, I think it's a case of semantics on their part. But yeah, when you have anything that is relative, and look, and transcribed interview that exonerates the former president of the United States, and you don't think that is relative because it's contrary to what your star witnesses said, I think that's very important, not only to preserve and archive, but for the American people to see. And they will continue to say, look, we documented everything and we kept all the supporting documentation and it's available online. Well, that's fine, they did. But it's the non-supporting documentation that tells the true story.
We'll be right back.